welcome to this special MadTech webcast. Today I've got Andy too from OpenX. Andy, how are you?
All good. I mean, Singapore is back on lockdown, but everything else, in all things consideration, we're all well.
Good stuff. I mean, I have to say it's 7 o'clock here in the UK. We had a few technical issues there beforehand. My laptop just exploded in front of us. So here I have my spare laptop, and apologies for being late this morning. Andy, thanks for coming on today. Today we're talking about the key findings from the report we did with OpenX on the state of programmatic and JAPAC. There's some really interesting stuff for us to discuss, and Andy's on here today to talk a little bit through that because some of the findings are really interesting. Andy, just before we go on, if people don't know who you are, just do a little brief introduction to yourself and what you do at OpenX.
Okay. I guess a brief introduction to myself as a person is I've been in the business for about 30 years now. So no spring chicken. The last 13, 14 years in APAC, I've been specifically focused on helping launching programmatic companies, both on the buy side and now on the sell side into the region. At OpenX, my primary role is basically help the business roll out across the region and support our partners, both demand and supply, across the 13 countries that make up the APAC region. Very good.
So let's talk about this report. Some interesting findings, and I just want to go through some of the stuff so we can discuss them today, because it has a lot of relevance to the current sort of COVID and obviously the growth of programmatic as well in the region. Let's kick off with, I want to start with this first because I want to get it out of the way because there's other interesting sort of tidbits from this. It's particularly around the IDFA and cookie deprecation. So publishers are favoring first-party data while agencies and marketers are turning to their technology providers to support. Despite fears, the overwhelming majority of brands are not shifting spend out of the independent web towards the walled gardens, which I guess is a very good thing. But I mean, from that, are we assuming that a lot of people are still kind of like leaning heavily on third-party cookies and not really doing an awful lot?
Well, I think it boils down to kind of like two things, right? The first thing is the cookies is something that people rely on, and it's basically what pays our bills, right? And it's hard to actually get ourselves out of that situation. And luckily, we got an extra couple of years to figure that out. And that just means to us that we need to accelerate, everybody needs to accelerate our plans to make sure we get that infrastructure in place before it happens, right? But in terms of what the findings found out is two things I really like about it. Is the fact that although people know that this is happening and now that we really have to focus on, looking for solutions or building out solutions, the main thing is that they are looking for solutions because they are not giving up on the open web. So that's one of the main things that I'm really excited about. I think the biggest challenges that we're going to face into the future is basically what solution or what suite of solutions that we need to actually deliver against this. I think in different parts of the region, of course, the publishers are a lot more advanced than maybe the brand marketers in thinking about this because it is their bread and butter. So the good thing is that there are plans, they are looking at plans, that are thinking about plans, and now they're actioning plans on seeing how we can solve that problem.
Are they gravitating from your perspective? Are they gravitating towards the sort of typical sort of fallback, like contextual, more first-party data? Are you seeing like stuff like clean room starting to end the conversations? I know you guys have built some interesting piece of tech which is coming out later in the year. Are you seeing more of this like what I'm seeing in this part of the world is that there could be that inertia that slows people down from progressing to those technologies that will make this business we can still do business in the way we've done previously, but it is that Google sort of get out of jail card for 3 years is stopping people from progressing to these more privacy first technologies?
I don't think it's stopping people from actually going forward and exploring and testing, right? So from the publisher perspective, definitely is we have first party data. We need to figure out a way to activate it. There are many solutions in the air, meaning There's a lot of people talking about it, there's buzzing about it, but nobody actually knows which one has scale and which one can actually work. So again, that's one level of it. The other level is the sophistication of the market itself. For example, Australia is very deep into this. We just had a conversation 2 days ago with a partner in Australia whose entire business is helping publishers activating the first party data, right? So in Australia, they're because of the nature of being more sophisticated in terms of programmatic, they're deeply thinking about what's the next step and what technology to test, right?
Yeah.
Then we're talking about markets like Japan, where I mean, honestly, that is something they're thinking about, but they haven't even gone to the step of let's see what we test, right? Yeah. So I think the answer to your specific question is that we can't say, because APAC's not homogenous, you got to look at multiple markets and you look at the different microcosms, right? But I think what it boiled down to answer your specific question, what we're seeing is people actually taking actionable steps to start talking about it and putting some plans in place to actually make it happen. And that extra 2 to 3 years that Google has given us is now, is almost like, hey, this is now serious. Let's really go talk about it and explore, right? Yeah. Now, but I have not seen everybody come down and say, yeah, I'm going to go do this or I'm going to do that. And that's all we're going to do. That's one side. Yeah. In terms of the ID solutions themselves, a lot of them are still going, okay, which market do I want to invest and build scale? Yeah. Right. So it's those two things combined. But there are definitely definitive conversations now versus where before it was a bit more theoretical.
Okay, that's good. So let's park that because I think a lot of airtime has been given up to that particular subject over the last couple of months. But one of the key interesting findings here is programmatic investment and percentage of revenue is growing across APAC, with nearly 2/3 of players increasing their programmatic investment percentage of revenue compared to 10% lowering their investment revenue percentage. That's quite interesting. I mean, and I think you could flesh that out a bit, Andy, as well, because a lot of that spend isn't just generally like retargeting. It's actually quite higher end sort of brand spend as well.
Yeah, well, I think it's two parts, right? So I would start out by saying hallelujah and amen. I mean, at least our salaries get paid in terms of programmatic spend increasing across the region. But I think it boils down to two parts. Yes, I think when we spoke last year, and then this goes back to what we've been knowing each other doing this for 15 years here. Yeah, right? Is that the shift away from just low CPC or performance-driven spend is happened or has happened and has continued to happen, right? So to answer your question, I think the spend comes from two parts. Number one is the fact that it is a channel that performs, and that investment will continue to organically grow even if we don't really push it. Because at the end of the day, everybody's at home. Digital is the primary channel for communication. People are going to use digital. Programmatic is efficient. It's going to drive performance, right? Yeah. The interesting growth part is last year we spoke about the growth in brands investing. So Unilever, P&G, the brands that really doesn't have, I mean, you don't really do a CPA on selling a shampoo online, from a Unilever perspective. Right, not from Lazada or their online sales channel perspective. So, but then they are investing more, especially on the video and formats and so on, to drive the brand affinity. So that's exciting. We see a lot of that growing, right? Another piece of this actually also growing, what is shown to grow, is actually in-housing, right? Brands such as Bunnings in Australia, right? We can call them e-commerce. We can call them, online e-commerce players, but they are spending quite a bit of money in programmatic, driving their own brand as well as their own performance. So I see, to answer your specific question, yes, majority part is performance driven, but then you got the brand spend increasing, and that already started about 3 years ago, right? And then now we have, in addition to that, we have a lot more people who are in-housing their spends or their buying, and then using programmatic to drive their own brand and or performance metrics.
Interesting.
That's actually exciting.
And the in-housing piece, then, are you seeing more of that happening in the region, or is it more a case of some some capabilities are in-house and others are still working with the agencies. I mean, is there a bit of a sort of hybrid model going on there? Because that's quite interesting as well.
Well, I think what I've seen so far is that let's take a step back, right? I'm going to be very clear on the breaking out the two brands. If we're talking about e-commerce players whose business is endemic to online, right? Then I would see that is more of a full in-house. They pick their own tech, they pick their own platform, right? Or suite of platforms, a tech stack, if you will, and they have teams in-house running their own campaigns, right? And I saw that about 3 years ago, rising up in markets like North America, right? But I didn't see much of it in Southeast Asia or even Australia, as an example. This last 6 months, just talking to different partners around the region, I'm seeing a lot more of that rising up, right? A Gojek, a Grab. I'm picking these names, not saying that they are doing it. I'm just saying those type of companies bringing in-housing, full in-housing, having their own teams running their own campaigns, right?
Interesting.
The flip side is that when you look at the big brands, let's take a. So this other group was just the advertisers, the brand advertisers. I see that still being hybrid, right? Okay. They have some in-house technology. And this actually ties to another point we'll probably talk about later, which I won't talk about now. But yes, they are taking a little bit more control over their tech stack, but still working together with agencies.
Yeah. Another point from the it dovetails nicely into the next point. The publishers in the report seem to have matured in terms of their strategic selection of header bidding partners, using relatively fewer providers in 2020 and prioritizing ease of setup for when existing providers are not meeting expectations. The use of Prebid has increased by over 10% market-wide, which is interesting because you were talking about the Prebid piece being a big story here.
Yeah. So I mean, if I can just kind of point out two things out of that whole jumble of things we just talked about, right?
Sure.
I think the whole thing about Prebid, right, ties back to the whole thing about transparency and taking control of your own destiny when it comes to publishers, right? So when we spoke last year, and then also when I first entered OpenX in January 2019 and started talking about publishers, I mean, there were some publishers using 15, 20 providers, right? And then I think that was based on the old ad network days of, as many unique demand you can drive, the more money I'm going to make, right? And was rightly so. And then now, as the research pointed out, that's been cut by 2/3, right? They're down to about 1 to 5 providers of header bidding solutions, right?
And is that a case that they're looking for unique demand, and that some header providers were basically getting demand from the same sources, so there was really that consolidation happening around that? Is that sort of the thinking behind that process?
Let me take a step back and think about it. Probably that has something to do with a lot with it, but I'm not sure if the publishers were aware that was what's happening on the back end within the header bidding providers, right? So that's why I was hesitating on a definitive answer, right? Within the example within OpenX, one of the things that we're very, very clear about is ad quality and inventory quality, right? And one of the things that we focused on was really just cutting out duplicative domains or inventory ourselves without prompt, right? I mean, if we see the same inventory coming from multiple partners connected to the exchange, we start cutting them. We automatically cut them out, right? So within exchanges, I guess as a business as a whole, I think we're pretty clear on maintaining or managing that kind of, shall we say, challenges, quality challenges, right? I don't think the publishers may not be fully aware of that. I think the publishers are more aware of seeing things like their inventory being sold, being the same impression being auctioned off in a DSP by 6, 7, 10, 11, right? SSPs or exchanges, right? So they're starting seeing that, and obviously that kind of completely depreciates your brand, right? So
Yeah.
they're starting seeing that, number one. I think number two, they're also really realizing that it's not the old waterfall ad network days where the more you add, the more your chances of being able to sell that same piece of inventory, right? They're just they're going back and cutting out what is unique, which provider can provide them with a unique inventory, unique demand that they need, and also for their own team sanity, that they can manage and grow that relationship better.
Yeah, yeah, and the pre-bid thing's quite interesting as well. I mean that was obviously you know, an innovation has happened a couple of years ago here, but in the APAC or JAPAC region now,
yeah,
it seems to be taken off quite significantly.
Which part?
Pre-bid.
The pre-bid.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is actually, I'm really excited about this one, right? Because up until, well, last year, right, when we first originally talked, was that yes, people are using header bidding, but they were using what I call the header bidding, what managed service header bidding, or the black box header bidding managed by different exchanges and SSPs.
Yeah.
Right. And then pre-bid, on the other hand, is what I call the white shining knight. That's 100% transparent. You control your own destiny, and that hasn't taken off yet last year. But since then and now, that I'm happy to see that's actually completely changed, and publishers are now definitely looking at building out their own solution using pre-bid as the core, right, rather than using a managed service solution, and which to me is indicative of the maturity of the market of the publishers, if you will, in this region, because you're talking about being able to control your own destiny, offset by the fact that unfortunately it means that you need to put more resources against it.
That's the problem. Well, it's not a problem, but it does require some developers. It does require a resource, but at the same time, it gives power back to you in terms of visibility
as a publisher. Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
But just saying this to our viewers here, if you have any questions for myself and Andy, like, we'll answer any questions, pop music, ad tech, whatever we want to do. No, any
as long as we keep it in the 80s.
Mostly from the 80s. Any questions you have regarding sort of the findings here, please pipe in. I'll put them to Andy in the Q&A function. Andy, just on that pre-bid, just continuing on one last point. Do you think that is a barrier, though, that technical development resource piece? Because obviously, you know, you have to put that in yourself, and most publishers won't do that. But do you see, you know, how do you see that go? Do you think publishers are investing in that resource to make that happen?
I think the larger publishers, I mean, this is standard growth curve for anything, right? I think the larger publishers with the resources are definitely making the effort to, you know, focus more on pre-bid as open source pre-bid, right? And then investing in that, building that out. I think if you look at it from a mid-tail, long-tail perspective, I think, frankly speaking, from a business rationalization perspective, it's probably just easier to work with somebody who can manage it for you, right?
Yeah.
And that is also a successful business, right? But I think the larger publishers are definitely looking at how they can actually resource around pre-bid rather than working with a managed service.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. I think that would be
because transparency, control your own destiny.
Yeah,
drives a lot more long-term strategic benefits than putting an extra couple of people in place.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one of the other points that was taken out was sort of the bounce back from COVID. 30% of respondents recording higher revenue spend compared with pre-COVID figures. This was particularly true among brands. However, agencies are showing a markedly slow recovery. Can you just focus a little bit on that? Because that's quite interesting that there has been a kind of a rebound, but the agencies are still coming out. Well, although the numbers are changing now, but they're still finding it difficult to get back to where pre-COVID.
You know what? I don't know. I don't actually have an answer to that. I saw that question, and I was a little curious myself. To be honest, I don't have an opinion on that, right? Because I would always think advertisers and agencies are hand in hand.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But then For that specific data point, I'm sorry, I really don't have an answer. But maybe we can do a follow up on that.
I think hold on. There might be I think that might be to do as well with resource as well. There's been a lot of news around hiring people, and there's a lot more jobs available at the minute. But we will come back to that one again. Yes. One point that was quite interesting that links back to the pre-bid conversation in Destiny was 2/3 of marketers and agencies have run SPO reviews in the previous 18 months, with 32% indicating that it was the first one they've ever done. This implies that marketers and agencies are not only acting on concerns over transparency, but are now more confident in conducting reviews and amending their programmatic pipeline as necessary. This may be being catalyzed by the rapid digital transformation business was forced to undertake as a direct result of the corona pandemic. But this is very interesting because, for years we've talked about how, there's a lot of duplication, a lot of, demand coming from the same sources. And this SPO thing is going to be massive, Andy. And now clearly it's taken a lot of the market by storm here.
Well, I think, as a whole, it's super exciting and super, super good for the industry.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason why is because it's driven by what I call the people who actually spend the money. Right. So what I mean by that is that it's the brands who's driving a lot of these SPO exercises. Right.
Yeah.
Either they influence their agency to drive the SPO, right? Or they as I going back to my point I made earlier, or they themselves are actually driving the SPO exercise, right?
Yeah.
And I think either way, I think it's actually super great for the industry and as a whole, because end of the day, it means if somebody's going to take a super close look at where the money goes, right? And how it's spent, and is it spent based on KPIs like brand quality, brand safety, ad quality, and so on, right? It means that they actually are starting to take this channel seriously, right? Rather than just good back 13 years ago, just great low CPC addendum. Now they're actually looking at it as this is something that we really want to invest a lot of money into, right? So it's a good thing. It's a brand and agency driving the SPO, right? And I think it's actually good for everyone for that. Sorry, I don't want to repeat myself.
So you think that is that SPO growth should be seen as a maturing of the market, in the sense that they've moved away from just looking for low value inventory to actually it's been a huge area of spend, particularly around brand, and this SPO is just a testament to that, and that it's a good thing for the market that this is coming in.
Yeah, it's a great thing that this is coming in, because it's indicative of two things, right? The first thing is that the marketers, the ones who are spending the money, the big marketers who are spending the money where we want to tap into, are taking this seriously. That's what they're paying attention to it, right? The second thing is that it's basically cleaning up the dross, right? What happens is that you go in there, you SPO, you clean it up, you make sure you get the best inventory that you can get a hold of, if you will, with the best audience. It naturally means that you're going to pay more for it, right? And they're willing to pay more for it. The willingness to pay more for it, that's the most interesting thing. So overall, by focusing on this, it's actually going to make everything rise up. It's like all boats, what's it?
Rising tide,
rising tide,
lifts all boats
kind of thing.
But it just to go off on a little tangent though, are you seeing more brand spend filtering into the system? Like, I know you guys do a lot of video and do more and more CTV. Are you seeing that shift away from just a Dior channel to being more brand spend, and this stuff just sort of underlines all that?
Well, I think, well, let's break that up for a bit. In APAC, I haven't seen a rise in CTV, a massive rise in CTV, based on what you'll see, let's say, in North America, right? And I think that it's a matter of time rather than anything else, of driving scale in terms of the available inventory. So let's take Park CTV for a second, right, as an example. But if you look at it from a video perspective, it's definite that we're seeing a lot more investment into video, right? So if I use video as a proxy, then I could definitely say it's a lot more less, performance-driven KPIs in the sense of low-cost CPCs or CPAs, but more towards more video-centric, the viewability and so on, brand safety, so on, type of metric. But what that tells me is that a lot more money is being pumped into video to drive the brand spend, right? Rather than the click and hopefully you click.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. One of the just moving on here, there's an interesting data point here around the majority of surveyed marketers and agencies professionals in JAPAC have access to first party data, which is great. Congratulations, everybody. However, worryingly, a high proportion, around 29%, do not believe there are great solutions available to activate that data on the open web. Now, this is interesting because I guess there's so many types of data available at the minute, right? And it's like getting that in a privacy first way and activated on the open web, because obviously we have a massive problem. Well, not a massive problem. We have the walled gardens who are sucking up spend. YouTube spend increases. Amazon's increases. Facebook's revenue increases, and this has a direct influence on the open web and publishers who we want to do well. So this could be, I suppose, a discussion around the technology that makes this technology work. It's interesting that these marketers and brands are saying this, Andy. What do you think we can do to make this work? I mean, I guess the advent of clean rooms, lots of sort of data infrastructure is going to make this sort of more sort of easier for brands and marketers.
Well, I mean, I think so. Let's break that up again, right? What you just spoke about is what I call the technology infrastructure. Yeah. The back end, right? Clean rooms, scale, what solution, etc. And to me, that's a global problem, right? And it's really like, and again, like global problems, it'll probably get solved or get close to a workable solution in a sophisticated market like North America or Europe. Yeah. Right. And then that technology will be deployed globally and into APAC, right? And from there, it'll probably be a country to country deployment versus a region-wide deployment, right? Clean rooms, solutions, and so on, right? So in scale and so on. I think where we are right now, I think that is at what I would even take it one step higher in terms of the value chain, is education, right? There's so much noise, right, in the market about the different solutions. I mean, UID, is it LiveRamp? Is it ID5? What is it? What is the solution, right? What do each one do? And then you have the agency holding companies who spend quite a significant amount of money over the last couple of years of buying their own ID solutions, right? A room with Axiom, and then Publicis with Epsilon, and then Dentsu with Merkle, right? So, which in itself are all sophisticated solutions. But the thing is just so many things being talked about. I don't think there's actually one single resource or anybody's actually taken a step back and say, well, these are the things that these are the things that it happens, and these are the things what it can do for you, and these are the things that can solve to a specific problem, if you will, right? So I think this is what I was inferring to at the beginning of our conversation, is that we now have an extra couple of years to actually figure this out, right?
Do you think that data point it points to that confusion in the market, because even and probably yourself and many people working,
I'm confused.
are completely like bamboozled about, we can do this and we can do that. And is it a case, Andy, that we might get to a point where it's just a collection of different stuff that works together, and it might almost be custom rather than one solution to solve them all, in the sense that you'll have the IDs, you'll have context, you'll have website data, you'll have offline data, and it's all about bringing it all together and making that work. And I think we're in this kind of like, we had this reliance on cookies and device IDs for so long that's going away. Now it's kind of reimagine the space, and it's going to take a couple of years to sort of like get our heads around this and understand what's possible. And you're right, like there is a lot of confusion. Well, what does a clean room do, right? And how does that work with my DMP? And how can I use all these IDs if they don't work across different environments, right? So will they work across Safari? And how do I make that work? And okay, so I use context, how am I going to measure this? So it's a bit of a shit show in many ways. I hate to use bad language this early in the morning, but it is a little bit.
Well, I 100% agree it's a shit show, because everything you just said, I don't fully understand how it's going to all tie together, right? Because end of the day, I mean, and we've been doing this for a long, long time, right? Because the only thing I can think of is going back to your hypothesis, which is it could be, for lack of a better phrase, a whole new tech stack just to manage your data. So it's like tech stack sitting on tech stack, sitting on tech stack, right?
Yeah.
I don't even know. Is there a plural for tech stack? Stack.
I don't know. Tech stackies,
stackies, whatever it is. Yeah. But it feeds back to both what you and I said at the beginning of this part of the conversation, which is people are confused.
Yes.
Right. There's a massive lack of education, right? What I say, rephrase myself. Every identity solution is making an effort to educate their own customers, right? So pitching out. So I can't say lack of education. It's too much of an umbrella statement. I think it's a lack of somebody pulling that story together as one, right? And say, and in an independent way, saying this is the way it should go, right? Number one. But then that's also backed by the fact that a lot of solutions, I can't say they're half-baked, they're not, right? But I can safely say they're not fully embedded.
Yeah.
Right? They're like my 6-year-old daughter versus, a full-grown adult.
I think our 6-year-old daughter would probably have more sense than a full-grown adult in many cases these days.
As long as it explores unicorns and ponies, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. So that's interesting. So, but it leads us into a conversation that the future then is custom, I think, in many ways, because it's going to be like trial and error. Like, and I think this is great for the industry and for the vendors in it, because I don't think there'll be one data stack to rule them all. I think there'll be. I think the future of our industry is interoperability. It's the ability, particularly for the open web. We can't have silos everywhere. We have to have an ability to API into various platforms and work together. Because I can imagine a clean room is good for like data joining, right? But it's not good for data collection or using sort of AI to figure out, analysis of specific data points that can drive strategic behavior. And then you've obviously got the execution layers where your DSPs and SSPs. So all that has to work together. And I guess that's where we're at the minute. I can totally vouch for that last data point there, that confusion, because to be honest, half the time I'm confused as to what's going on. There's so much companies saying we can do this, we can do that. And I got a question here from a person which is which quite fits in nicely. It's a lot of PR every time an agency or a publisher joins Unified ID 2.0. What's the true scale right now? Will it ever have the scale to compete with Google? And it's a good question, but the reality is it will never it will never compete with Google on its own. But part of this joined up connection between context and other ID solutions and all the other data points in this new sort of tech stack, if you will, because it'll be interoperable and modular, that we will be able to work the way we used to before, and in a privacy first way, because that's important as well.
Yes. Well, I'm at 100% agree with that answer, right? So the UI, I see the same question. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to talk about scale because I have no idea, right?
Yes.
I think honestly, the better answer is go to Trade Desk guys and ask my ex-colleagues and friends. But in terms of where I think it is, right, is that it's really, again, at the very initial, it's a tip of the iceberg at the stage right now, right? The whole point is driving scale, is try to scale by the number of big publishers or advertisers or stakeholders who buy into using UID. That's the exciting part, right? It's not the actual, how many people are actually logging in separately and sending their data into the, for lack of a better phrase, the now open source UID database, right?
Yeah.
It's right now, it's more of, it's the path to get there. But I 100% agree with your answer to the last thing about competing with Google at scale, right? Don't know.
Yeah.
Honestly, don't know. Because again, this will probably be, it could be the starting point of the new, tech stack, ID tech stack. You heard it here first, right? ID stack. That's a good one.
I think it's going to be part of a bigger sort of set of data points. I just don't think that ID will be able to compete with Google, and so Google has got a login that spans across hundreds and billions of users globally. Likewise, Facebook. But we don't have to compete with Google. Like, I think that they will be constricted as to how they use their own first party data, specifically in the Apple domain, which is actually a big advantage for the open web. I know that people go on about Apple all the time, but actually what they've done the open web a massive favor, because they've blunted the ability of Google, Facebook, and Amazon to do what they've done elsewhere, and it gives us a new impetus to build new technologies that are going to work in the decade ahead.
Agree.
Yeah.
Agree.
Good stuff. I think we've sort of covered most of the sort of points today. I want to, if there's anything else you want to talk about, Andy, please tell me now. But I just wanted, the report was released yesterday, and it's on the Exchange Wire site download. It's a fascinating read, and there's some really interesting data points in it. But for me, what I'm encouraged most is that it feels that the market is maturing, in the sense that it's kind of shadowing a lot of the US and European markets, but at the same time kind of going in its own direction as well. It's an interesting sort of as you say, it's not a homogenous market. There's definitely different sort of areas that are more progressive, but also areas that are kind of reflective of the devices, etc., that are used in those markets as well. I think that the e-commerce stuff is going to be fascinating. I think that the sort of the growth in that in-housing piece, Andy, you talk about. I also think that the commerce media stuff, we're going to see a big shift from ad tech into that as well. Like, you've got a lot of local players in the APAC market, which is why it's very unique. I just don't think that the market is going to be as homogenous globally as display was. There's a lot of different local champions, as you pointed out, Gojek's, etc. They have very strong market share in Southeast Asia and other parts of Asia. So this is going to be, I think, programmatic is going to evolve in a very different way this decade, which is starting sort of, those data points are pointing to that in the report itself.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, the most interesting thing I could see, three main parts, right, is that, as we talked about at the very beginning, I mean, the growth is there. I mean, just from my own numbers, I could see that the growth is there, right? and which is all great, pays our bills. I think the main thing is from demand and supply side is the demand. Sorry, I don't want to, for lack of a better word, the demand for transparency, right? The demand for the truth, if you will, in media, both on buyer side or demand side with SPOs and them making their own decisions on where they spend the money. And then also on the publisher side with their move towards pre-bid and controlling their own destinies, how they sell their inventory.
Yeah.
Right? So those are two things. I think the third thing is really what's interesting is that nobody has given up on an open web.
No, and they shouldn't, because it's such an amazing sort of ecosystem.
Yes. So there's definitely a lot of head scratching going, well, how are we going to deal with this, cookie deprecation, how we're going to deal with first party data, how we're going to do identity solutions, definitely scratches in the head about that. But the point is people are still investing in the open web, investing deep into the open web.
But that's a point about the open web is it can't be abandoned. It has such unique audiences and such unique context, and it's more premium than the sort of social media nonsense that we're used to. So I think we'll find a way to evolve around that, which is great to see, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think the best part is from a programmatic perspective, just purely what's exciting about a spend perspective is the brands are moving in, right?
Yes.
They may not be doing it in housing, but they are definitely looking at programmatic as a viable channel versus a channel where they just get low CPCs.
Yeah.
I think there's a
question here, but I think it says so much talk about contextual intelligence, but are any of the solutions any good? Just glorified keyword targeting. Any comments? I think, like, anonymous attendee, thank you for that. I don't know who you are. But I think the thing about context is that there's a lot of good solutions out there, but the problem with context is measurement, right? I believe if you can nail measurement, context will work, whether it's keyword targeting or anything else. At the end of the day, measurement is everything, right? If we can solve that problem, all of this works, and that is one of the key areas that we're all looking at the minute. And I think that's why there's a big play around the ID solutions. There's a big play around new types of measurement, whether that's a reversion back to some kind of evolution of the panel-based system, or something completely different. I think that's exciting as well. That's the great thing about our industry. There's going to be lots of evolution, and I agree with you, Andy. I think the open web is going to have a strong future, and it's going to be. I think there's a decoupling coming away from Google, which is going to be good for ad tech and good for the industry in general.
Yeah, and to be honest, I haven't seen any. Well, first of all, unique. The last question they asked about unique offerings in this region, right? I don't know about you, Karen, but I haven't seen anyone or heard of anyone coming out with something terribly unique in comparison to what's available today, right? GDN or keyword search, right? So I don't have to answer this anonymous attendee. I haven't seen any, right? So we'll have to see.
Yeah. But context is evolving, so you'll probably see some new companies soon.
New companies coming out.
Okay, so I think we'll wrap up there, Andy.
Okay, cool.
Again, thank you for your time. I apologize for my computer blowing up this morning. That's the show business. That's what can I say?
Yeah, exactly. As I said, at least you're fine.
Yeah, and everybody, the report was been released yesterday. It's available to download on Exchange, where we'll send out links to everybody. It's a good read, and particularly for there's very little data generally around the APAC and JAPAC markets. So it's actually a fascinating read, and it's great that see the market maturing this way. And look, there are definitely hurdles, there are definitely barriers, but that's the great thing about our industry. It evolves beyond the legacy. So I think some of the stuff that's coming up is going to be fascinating, and I'm very excited about the next decade.
Yeah, and more importantly, I want to see what happens next year when we do this again with the third report.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Looking forward to that, and hopefully we'll be in ATS Singapore early next year.
And talking face to face. Yep.
Yes, great.
All right, guys.
All right, Andy.
See you later.
Thanks very much. Bye bye. See you all, guys. Bye bye.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Bye.